Well, a very good Sunday morning to you, and welcome to the program. It is the Clear Channel Community Spotlight, our public affairs presentation each Sunday morning. And today, our special guest is Lindsay Coates. She is the executive director of the Ag Against Hunger organization here in Monterey County. Lindsay, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Appreciate you being able to join us. And this is kind of neat. We had you at the radio station a little earlier to record some public service announcements about a project, a fundraising project for Ag Against Hunger. And I appreciate your hanging around to talk to us a little bit about Ag Against Hunger and what you folks do. Well, first things first, for those who have not yet heard the 30-second announcement that you did for us, let's talk a little bit about Ag Against Hunger. First off, what is Ag Against Hunger?
Ag Against Hunger is an organization that was founded in 1990. We are based in Monterey County, and our mission is to create a connection between the agricultural community and food assistance programs to prevent hunger. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we collect fresh surplus produce from Monterey County, Santa Cruz County, and San Benito County, and we take it to our cooler and consolidate it and then distribute it to food banks locally across California and even across the West Coast. Mm-hmm. So we're a really small organization, but we do a lot of wonderful things. Last year, we distributed 13.5 million pounds of fresh, nutritious produce. So that was a really big deal for us.
Who founded Ag Against Hunger? Who came up with the idea and put it together? Was this something that came out of City Hall or the county, or was it private industry, local folks?
Ag Against Hunger was actually the brainchild of Tim Driscoll. He came up with it when he was taking part of an ag leadership program. They were in Texas at the time for the program, and they were doing a brown bag distribution program. And he was loading up vegetables into a brown bag and then passing it out to hungry seniors. And he had an epiphany. He realized that in Monterey County, 20% of the produce actually went to waste at that time. And so he decided to get together with Jess Brown of the Santa Cruz Farm Bureau and Willie Elliott McCrae of Second Harvest Food Bank out of Watsonville. And the three of them really lobbied and came up with this idea of how to rescue this surplus produce and give it to food banks. And originally, in the beginning, they thought they were going to rescue 50,000 pounds the very first year. They ended up rescuing 500,000 pounds in the very first year that we were in operation.
Wow.
And like I said, last year in 2012, we rescued 13.5 million pounds just from the Tri-County area.
Now, when you talk about rescuing this produce,
yes.
And they were talking about, going back 23 years, Tim Driscoll putting this thing together, is this what would have been left in the fields to rot or get, disked back in, or was this capacity, this was product sitting in the coolers that they hadn't sold?
This is actually product sitting in the coolers that they haven't sold. Almost all of our product that we receive is actually already packaged.
So you're not handing out gleanings.
We do gleans as well. That's
right.
That's another program that we have, but our flagship program is the Harvest Program, where we are rescuing produce that is just not being sold because of marketing conditions.
Okay.
Market conditions.
Right. And then as far as you look at the millions of pounds of produce that you rescue every year, what percentage is unsold product and what percentage is gleanings?
I would say about 90% is the unsold product and about 10% is actual gleaning.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And 13.5 million pounds last year.
Yes, 13.5 million.
Is that a record?
Nope, 14 million pounds. That was 2011. That's a record.
Okay.
That's definitely a record. And it really just depends on what's going on with the produce market. That really dictates what's going to happen with us every.
When you talk about these huge numbers, millions of pounds, 13 million, 13.5, 14 million, if we were to try and envision this, and by the way, this is all, we haven't rehearsed any of this, folks. So any question I ask Lindsay, her answers are impromptu, but or based on your knowledge is what I mean. So I'm gonna throw one out here to you. I don't know if you're going to know this off the top of your head. I hope you do. But, okay, cross your fingers. You talk about these huge numbers, 13.5 million pounds, 14 million pounds, what have you. If I was to look, like, I'm in a helicopter looking down on the Salinas Valley, looking at fields, how big would the fields be? If we're talking about that many millions of pounds, how many acres are we talking about? Have they ever quantified it that way and said that represents X number of acres of vegetables?
We have never quantified it that way, but I bet you I will be doing so
because
that's a really great visual to have. I honestly don't know how many acres that is, especially because, lettuce is so lightweight. Right. And when you compare it with broccoli and cauliflower, which is also a wonderful commodity that we grow a lot of here in Monterey County.
But it's heavier.
It's much, much heavier.
Okay.
So it's really hard to tell you exactly how many acres it would be, just because we have such a diverse variety of produce that we grow here in Monterey County. Lots of wonderful specialty crops.
So, and what is it, like in that 13.5 million pounds, what vegetables are we talking about that are part of the program that you're able to distribute to people and I guess to the food banks?
Well, as you know, we are the salad bowl of the world. So, of course, the majority of our produce is going to be some type of lettuce variety or spinach. But we also have broccoli and cauliflower and artichokes and strawberries. At certain times of the year, when the market dictates it, we have a cooler full of strawberries. But we also have something really exciting that we've been doing for the last couple of years. It's our sharing program, where we take surplus vegetables that we grow here in our valley, and we give it to the Community Food Bank in Fresno or the St. Mary's Food Bank in Arizona. And from them, we get a fresh truckload of fruits, stone fruits or citrus or whatever type of fresh vegetable they're growing at that time in Arizona or in Fresno, and we bring that back to our recipients in Monterey County, Santa Cruz County, and San Benito County.
Okay.
We're really trying to help these community food banks create a nice, diverse diet rich in vegetables and fruit.
Okay. So because of the fact that, wintertime or actually summertime, they can't grow lettuce down there, and our climate is never the climate for stone fruit here. So, so it's a way of having, like you say, the diversity of offerings for people.
Yes, exactly.
Is dairy part of that mix ever?
No, it's not, and that's because we just don't store it at our cooler.
Okay.
So if we ever hear about a really wonderful trade that another food bank that we service 27 food banks. So if a food bank has a surplus of some really exciting item that maybe we could bring down to our Tri-County area, we do make it a point to try and figure out how to do that. It just may never actually arrive in our cooler because we can't store it.
Okay.
So I would never say no to dairy.
And, is it that Ag Against Hunger is like a go-between organization between the food banks and the growers?
Yes, we are technically a clearinghouse. We make it so that there's one source to go to when there is surplus. And so that way we're not having several food banks lining up at different growers' docks, waiting to be loaded. That way it's just us. We can take it to our cooler and then break up these loads. A food bank is not going to be able to take a full truckload of iceberg lettuce. They just don't need that much. They don't need 26 bins or pallets of iceberg lettuce. So that's why we are so important. We can take it and break it up and give every food bank a little of something from what we pick up so that they have, a diverse offering to give to their clients.
Okay. And so the food banks have coolers, but nothing like the capacity that you have.
That's correct. Yes, They have to store the things like you were talking about, the dairy and the meat and some of these other items. We just focus solely on produce. That is what we do. We represent the ag community and their philanthropic efforts to help feed the hungry and to prevent waste.
All right. And with with all the food that you store and so forth, like the vegetables, let's say we're talking about salad, when you are making those donations to the food banks, is it a bulk product? Is it like cartons of heads of lettuce, or is it actual, the bagged lettuce?
We get both, and
Okay.
it depends on what kind of organization we're giving it to. We know that every food bank that we service has different needs, and they have different agencies that they service. So sometimes a food bank will service an agency that is a cafeteria-style agency.
Okay.
So we know that they want the food service type 10-pound, iceberg lettuce bags or mixed salad bags. And then there's other agencies that service purely seniors, like the California Gray Bears in Santa Cruz. So we make sure to give them the really small-sized product or the product that hasn't been packaged yet so they can put it in their brown bag program.
All right. And with those packaged products, those aren't coming from the field or from the growers. Those would be coming from processors, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so besides being a clearinghouse for the growers, you're also receiving product from processors that can't move the bag product.
And shippers as well.
Okay, so we
represent the whole ag community.
All right. And how many, like if you look at the numbers of what we're dealing with, numbers of growers, shippers, the packers, the actual, just how many folks are part of Ag Against Hunger and work with you? There
are about 50 growers and shippers in the Tri-County area that work with us and growing, hopefully.
Right. Wow. And that makes up that 13.5 million pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been any study done that would represent what the health benefit has been that you've been able to provide this food to so many people over the years, and how that's changed, their health, and that they're able to get food that maybe in the past they weren't able to get, or not as much of it? Anything done like that?
There's never been a study done, but we all know that people who are low income and can't afford to buy food like fresh fruits and vegetables, they're having to instead make choices to pay their rent or for fuel. They are the ones in our society that are most susceptible to diabetes, obesity, hypertension. So we know that fresh fruits and vegetables will help prevent some of these diseases. And if we can expose them to the fresh fruits and vegetables, they are going to make, better choices and they're better food choices. So I don't know, have you ever participated in the Monterey County Food Bank family markets?
No.
Have you ever heard of that? It's a wonderful thing that the Monterey County Food Bank does. They actually take the produce that we directly donate to them, and they will set up markets throughout Monterey County to invite individuals to come and essentially pick produce from the Monterey County Food Bank, and they can come and pick whatever type of produce that they want to take home with them. And so we know that these people really want the choices of fresh fruits and vegetables. They just don't have access to it.
Lindsay, do the food banks, whether you're dealing with Second Harvest in Santa Cruz or San Benito or Monterey County Food Bank, do they ever have too much food, or are they in the situation where they've run out?
They're all in the situation where they have run out.
So none of it's ever spoiling?
No, it's not spoiling, ever.
Okay.
And we make it a goal. We know how much they can take. And so that's why we actually have 4 tiers of food banks that we provide food to. So what we do is
what do you mean by tiers?
Tiers. So
explain what the tiers are.
There's all these food banks are members of the Ag Against Hunger community. Okay. But what we do is we put them in the different tiers of food banks based on their location to us and our ability to get them the produce. So food banks in the first tier obviously make up our Tri-County area. We call them, whenever we have produce, they are our first priority. After they have been satisfied and have taken as much as they can take without it going to waste, we then call our second tier, which is made up of San Francisco, Alameda, Santa Clara, Santa Barbara, the food banks that are, still relatively close to us. Once they're satisfied, we move on to the third tier, and that's other food banks throughout California and California Emergency Food Link, which services food banks in remote Northern California areas. Mm-hmm. And then finally, after all of California has been satisfied, we move on to our fourth tier, and those are out-of-state food banks. So we service food banks in Washington, in Texas, Arizona, Utah, Oregon. We kind of go all over the place, but we always make sure that California and especially our local community food banks are satisfied.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier the trading of,
yes.
with San Joaquin Valley or even Arizona for products. Is that in that tier thing, or is that outside of
it? That still is a part of the tier. So Fresno Community Food Bank is in our third tier, and obviously the St. Mary's Food Bank in Arizona, they're in our fourth tier. We also trade with the Northwest Harvest and Seattle Food Bank.
How many other growing areas in California or across the country have clearinghouses like Ag Against Hunger?
I don't know the number, but I know there are several organizations that have either a clearinghouse or they have a gleaning program, or they're not necessarily a food bank. They are a go-between. I couldn't tell you the number, though.
But yours was the first in the country, the one here in Monterey County.
Yes, it was the first in the country.
So this is a model that may have been copied in other places.
Yes, and thankfully so. There's 50% of the food in the world goes to waste. So organizations like ours are necessary, and I hope that more of them start popping up all over the country.
When we talk about the food waste, what have you seen as to what accounts for the food waste? Are we talking about that it's on the distribution end, that there's just no market for it, and so it goes to waste, or are we talking on the end user part of it?
I think some of it's on the end user. I think some of it is at grocery stores in particular. People want produce that looks perfect.
Right.
And a lot of it just doesn't. And a lot of that produce goes to waste. But I know that there are food rescue programs with a lot of food banks to try and get that produce out. So
do grocery stores, if they have like produce that maybe it isn't as visually appealing, so people, they know what their customers want, right? Mm-hmm. Do they call you guys
No, they would definitely call the food bank. We work mostly with large truckloads. We work with the 26 to 28 pallet loads of trucks. And when they're having surplus like that or waste like that, they would definitely need to call the local community food banks because they could handle that size waste.
All right. Mm-hmm. Now, earlier when we were talking about the fact that you came in to record an announcement for us for a cooler capacity expansion, let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
How much cooler capacity do you have right now at your facility, and what are you building towards?
Well, we right now only have about 5,000 square feet, which is amazing that we can move 13.5 million pounds of produce in and out of our cooler. We're hoping to rent more space this year to try to have an extra staging area, if you will. If you never know when you're going to have more surplus. Mm. And we're also trying to maintain and fix some of our aging equipment. We have 3 large 53-foot trailers, 2 tractor trucks, several forklifts. We're hoping to get a bobtail truck, a refrigerated bobtail truck this year. So some of the money that we're trying to raise will go towards maintaining that equipment and finding extra space for us this year. Eventually, we would love to build a cooler, but it's just not in our cards right now.
Okay. So this public service announcement we recorded about, supporting the cooler, is that actually money to be able to rent cooler space elsewhere?
Yes, it is.
So this isn't going to be in the building you're currently in. It might be somewhere else in that area.
It'll be somewhere else very close, and this will only be – we have peak months of June, July, and August where we have a really hard time managing a lot of the surplus that comes in, and we really need some extra space specifically during that time of the year. So our hope is that we'll be able to afford to rent a little bit of extra space.
Okay, for the peak months.
Yes, for the peak months.
This wouldn't be for year-round.
No, we wouldn't need it for year-round.
How much space is it going to be?
We're hoping to get another 3,000 to 5,000 square feet.
Okay, so almost double what you have.
Yes, to make it more manageable so that we can do a better job of making sure we are rescuing every single piece of surplus produce that we can get.
So do you then divide and say, okay, well, the lettuce and X, crops XXX will go into this cooler, and then the other cooler will be used for so forth.
Exactly. Yes.
Wow.
That's the goal. So hopefully we can get one right down the street. There's a lot of cooler space in Salinas. We just have to be able to afford it.
Oh, okay. So, let's get into that for a second. Sure. Is cooler space expensive?
Yes.
Compared to what?
Well, anything is expensive to a nonprofit. Okay. So if we have to pay for it, it's expensive in our book.
but I'm thinking cooler space here compared to, say, cooler space in Watsonville, cooler space in Fresno. I'm just wondering how because generally coastal California things tend to be more expensive than other places.
We haven't looked for cooler space anywhere else because we really need to be near the growers that we work with more often, which are growers obviously in Salinas. But I've never done a comparison study for cooler space.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
probably should.
Never
You're giving me all these ideas.
You're writing them down.
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. Our guest is Lindsay Coates. She's the executive director of Ag Against Hunger, a 23-year-old organization here in Monterey County, the first of its kind in the nation, which acts as a clearinghouse between the ag industry and the food banks. And as Lindsay had mentioned, that they've something like 2 billion servings of fresh vegetables and fruits over the years to people. And they just keep on going, and 13.5 million pounds of produce. How did you get into this business anyway?
How did I get into this business?
Yeah, how do you end up running an organization like this, and what spurred your interest?
Well, I always was interested in working for a nonprofit that does something that I'm personally passionate about. And when I moved to Salinas 3 years ago, I actually applied to Ag Against Hunger for their marketing director position and was hired for my marketing skills. And since I've lived here, I have fallen in love with the people in the ag industry. They are the most generous, loving, and giving people that you could ever come across. And our organization shows that they're doing everything possible to help the people not only in our community, but to prevent the waste of the wonderful produce that they're growing. So my interest really comes from just helping people and doing my part. And I think the organization that I work for is absolutely amazing and necessary, and I'm really proud of it. Mm-hmm. And I actually took over as executive director back in October after I came off of maternity leave, which was kind of fun. And it's just been kind of a whirlwind ever since. And I have a lot of ideas and a lot of programs that I can't wait to come back and talk to you about after they get off the ground.
Now, can you give us any hints of what you have coming up without letting the cat out of the bag completely, but maybe let an ear or two out?
Well, we have...
Maybe just have the ear peek out of the bag a little bit on the cat.
We have a really special and exciting program that we're doing with a certain local food bank that I can't wait to come back and tell you more about.
Okay. And this is something for 2013 or 14?
2013. So give me a couple months. I'll be back.
Right. Well, you've been in the business now for 3 years.
Yes.
In this particular end of nonprofits and food rescue. Where do you see this business going? You know, where do you see it in 5 years and in 10 years?
I see that, of course, we're going to continue attempting to rescue as much surplus produce as possible. But my hope is that we can really expand the concept of our sharing program to try and bring in more diverse product to the people that are locally near us, to the food banks that we work with. In 5 to 10 years, I really see that particular program expanding because it's important. Mm-hmm. And we have the produce to give to, the 27 food banks that we service. Why can't we bring more diverse produce back here?
Do you ever worry that with advances in technology on the production end, on the field end, that the ability for farmers to better manage inputs and crop capacities and so forth, that they could, technological advances could make it possible for farmers to not overproduce. Mm-hmm. And if they're not overproducing, then that that interrupts your business model. So, is that a concern you have?
It's not a concern. All of the farmers that we work with have done some major advances in their crop production and are really trying to decrease the amount of surplus that they have. But it really hasn't affected us because the market and what people's tastes are will always change. And we can't control the weather. Mm-hmm. And that's really the big key of why there's so many market fluctuations is with weather. Weather
and consumer demand, because
it will always change.
And of course, when you're any of these crops that you're growing, let's say you have, what was it, like 45 days in a field of lettuce? Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of things can change in a month and a half. It doesn't, to those of us, 45 days doesn't sound like a lot of time, but in a lot of respects, to try and, with something perishable like that, to try and figure out and say that 45 days from now, and you're just one player, you're one grower, so multiply that by all the other growers, right? Absolutely. That 45 days from now, the market is going to want exactly this much. I guess
and so you might leave it. They might leave it in the field, and if that's the case, then we'll expand our gleaning program even more than what we have today, and bring people out into the fields to act as harvest crews. Mm-hmm.
But I guess the other thing I was driving at is that it's just really kind of impossible to be so precise.
It is impossible, and thankfully we have our organization here to make up for the fact that it's impossible to be precise.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's great work that you folks are doing, and it's really, I mean, it's something that everybody in this community can be proud of. And I look at this as because particularly for Salinas, because we all know the challenges that this city faces, and a lot of the the problems that are out there. We don't have to go into them, but hey, there are some real challenges for Salinas in this community. But to have something like this is, I think it's something that, in spite of everything else we deal with, to be able to point to an organization like Ag Against Hunger and what it does in cooperation with growers and with food banks is something that everybody in this county can just take great pride in.
Yes, we have a lot to be proud of, and our agricultural community is, like I said, incredibly generous, so we're really thankful for them.
And the amazing thing about that, too, Lindsay, is that if you go back in history, this isn't a recent thing. It's not a 23-year-old thing. I mean, we can go back, and I know you've only been here in the community 3 years, and I've been here longer than you and the other people who've been longer than both of us combined. But this ag community in Salinas and the Salinas Valley have always been very philanthropic. If you look back at the construction of Salinas Valley Memorial Hospital, which was on land that belonged to the Bruce Church and family that they donated for the hospital, and they raised, they sold the scrip and raised the money to build the hospital. And so then you look around the Rodeo grounds, the new stadium going in, the Steinbeck Center. That's always been an amazing story to me because, you go back into the 30s when Steinbeck was writing all his famous books, and, the growers in Salinas Valley took a pretty good beating from Mr. Steinbeck.
Yeah, they did.
Okay?
Yes.
And yet it's the children and the grandchildren of those growers, those same growers, that came back decades later and said, we'll build a monument to this guy.
It's amazing.
I don't know if that happens in too many places.
No, it doesn't.
But some real positives. Well, I appreciate your coming in. Anything else you want to share with us about Ag Against Hunger before we wrap things up here?
Just that our gleaning program will be starting up again in the beginning of May. And this year, we're hoping to glean commodities that are more needed at our cooler and therefore at our food banks, like the broccoli and cauliflower and hopefully strawberries for any strawberry growers that are listening. So please check out our website, agagainsthunger.org. We'll be having our gleaning schedule up in March.
So you're looking for volunteers to help with that?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And do you ever have need for volunteers at the facility itself, for office work and so forth?
We're always looking for volunteers or interns who are willing to help us with maybe some of the administrative work or public relations work. So yes, we're always open for that.
We're on 5 stations with this program, including KION, which is our the station that appeals to the young community. So for some of the young people who might be listening that might be interested in a career in agriculture or nonprofits, you have intern positions. What will they learn by joining on with you?
They will learn and meet all of the wonderful people, again, who are in our agricultural community. And they will learn how to really help a nonprofit give and do their part and stick to their mission. So it's a wonderful thing.
So they have an opportunity to learn how to network and how important that is.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal networking in this community, in any community.
All right. Our guest has been Lindsay Coate. She's Executive Director of Ag Against Hunger. AgAgainstHunger.org is the website. And Lindsay, I appreciate you joining us on the Clear Channel Community Spotlight.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
This is the Clear Channel Community Spotlight, a public affairs presentation of Clear Channel Radio, Salinas, Monterey. If you'd like to write to us about our programs, you can write to us in care of the Public Affairs Director at Clear Channel Radio, 903 North Main Street, Salinas, California, 93906. Thank you for 06. 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 Thank you for 06.